My name is Rabbi Steve Schwartz. So I was trying to figure out how many years it's been since I had the opportunity to share some of Yontif with all of you here in the Offit. And I'm thinking at least 6 or 7 years since we combined the second day Rosh Hashanah services. You'll remember second day Cantor King and I, and before I was the senior rabbi, Rabbi Loeb and Cantor King would come in to do the second day services here in the Offit. It's been at least 6 or 7 years since we're combined second day, maybe longer than that, might be a decade. And then before that, the opportunity to work with my friend and colleague Michael Leslie, which has always been a great pleasure. And that, you probably have to go back 13 years or 14 years. And to see so many friendly faces, and also to welcome so many who are joining us online tonight. So I'm grateful that I can be here with all of you. And I think, like all of us together, just praying for a year that's sweet and healthy and full of all the things that we hope to find at this moment, looking forward to when we'll be together next year, welcoming next Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. If you think about the two holidays together, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we call them in English the High Holy Days, is how we usually refer to them. And in Hebrew, we call them, anybody know? The Yamim Noraim, probably best translated as the days of awe. So the sense is, we call them the same thing, they're part and parcel, and almost like they're twin holidays. Like there's nothing that distinguishes them, and it's true that if you look at the prayers that we recite, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, number of the prayers, not all of them, but many of them overlap. And of course, some of the themes, at least, some of the motifs of the holidays overlap as well. But I would argue that if you dig just a little bit under the surface, you don't have to go that far, that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are really very different holidays. They're different in feel, they're different in tone, and I would say also different in intent. Now, some of the most obvious differences, maybe the most obvious of all, is that on Rosh Hashanah we feast, and on Yom Kippur we fast. Good. This is like that game on NPR. You ever listen Sunday morning, like it's the puzzle game? Okay, let's try another one. Rosh Hashanah we celebrate. Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur, I would say we contemplate. Rosh Hashanah celebrate, Yom Kippur contemplate. Rosh Hashanah afternoon, we spend our time, of course, eating Rosh Hashanah lunch and then kibitzing with our families and our friends, hopefully. And some of us go to Tashlich. Yom Kippur afternoon. Steve said walk the park. I was going to say take a nap. Isn't that what most people do? Rabbis don't so much get to do that, although if you catch me at the right time in my office tomorrow afternoon, I can't promise you my eyes will be open. Rosh Hashanah thematically, is about the world. We say in the liturgy, the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, that it's Yom Harat Olam, which means the birthday of the world. So Rosh Hashanah has a kind of a universal feel to it, universal concerns. Yom Kippur is not global like that. Yom Kippur is about us. It's about our own lives. It's about looking inward to who we are. So it's much, much more intimate than Rosh Hashanah. And the last thing is Rosh Hashanah, I think, is noisy. It's a noisy holiday. I mean, even the central symbol of the holiday, which has to be the shofar, at the end of the day, what's the shofar but a noise maker? And the services are loud. There's a lot of tumult. And the shofar itself in a traditional service is sounded 100 times. A Yom Kippur is not that way. A Yom Kippur is somber, and it's quiet, and it has this sense of seriousness to it until tomorrow evening. As Ne'ilah is coming, the sun is going down, and we begin to feel the joy of having gone through this day of self-reflection and introspection. And then our hearts lighten, and we declare this audible and joyous end to Rosh Hashanah, to the day of judgment, to the time of judgment, and we sound that great Tekiyah Gedolah. But up until that point, at least my experience of Yom Kippur is that it's a somber day. Now, this year was really wonderful to welcome people back to the building and to celebrate the joy and the noise and the tumult and the kibitzing and the shofar of Rosh Hashanah. Seasons change, and New Year on the liturgical calendar begins. And there's an old rabbinic dictum that comes to my mind, Kal Hashana u'kalotecha, Tachel Shana uvirchotacha. So you close a year and all of its bad things, like shut the book and let's move forward, and you open a year with the hope that in that new year you will find blessings. And I think in the COVID age, which is what we have to call this time, we have an even deeper understanding of how much we need those communal moments of celebration and joy to lift our spirits. But I would argue that we also need, and maybe we've also learned this in a deeper way, that we also need the quiet and contemplation of this day, of a Yom Kippur day. We need time to think. We need time to reflect. We need what our tradition calls cheshbon hanefesh. It's an accounting of our lives. And I think it can only happen properly on Yom Kippur. Here's the problem. Our world today, it's hard to find time just to sit down quietly and to think. I mean, it's something I struggle with terribly. It's a noisy world. I went out to walk the dog the other day. It's where I get most of my good thinking done, actually. When I'm walking the dog, a lot of my sermon arranging happens when I'm out walking the dog. We have a new puppy. She's 8 months old. Maybe I should say she walks me because she drags me around the neighborhood. That's another conversation. But why do I get my thinking done out there? Because it's quiet. Because there's no phone ringing. There's no one talking to me. I mean, the dog doesn't yet talk. Okay, so we're working on that as well. But a couple of days ago, I'm hoping to get a little thinking done because Yom Tov is coming. I got stuff to do, I got things to think about. And I go out expecting a quiet neighborhood. And my luck, every single lawn in the neighborhood was being cut at precisely that moment on exactly the same day. So every lawnmower is buzzing, every edger is edging and whirring and whizzing. The leaf blowers were blowing as well. And I realized that's a lot like our lives today. That's a lot like our lives. There's constant noise. And the noise isn't only audible noise. There's a tremendous amount today of what I would call digital noise. And when I say that, what I mean is the constant stream of information that comes to us nonstop, over and over and over, the emails and the texts and the social media alerts and the news headlines and the sports scores. You can take your pick. In a metaphoric sense, the smartphone is probably the noisiest object that's ever been invented. The noisiest object that's ever been invented. And yet, what do? We keep them with us all the time. And most of the time, not only do we have them with us, we have them right in our hands. So in that kind of world, when do you have time to sit down and quietly think? So I would suggest that that's what we do during these 25 hours of Yom Kippur. That's the time. It's our opportunity to shut off the phones, to take a step back from the world that is all around us, and to immerse ourselves in the quiet and the calm, to stop looking outward, but to instead look inward and to contemplate where we've been and where we're headed. It is uninterrupted time to think and to reflect. And that begs a question, which is, what should we be thinking about? What should we be thinking about on Yom Kippur? Now, I'm guessing that you probably come to any Yom Kippur evening and day with a fairly long list of things in your mind that you would like to consider over the next 25 hours. Things that have happened to you in the year that's gone by, struggles that you've faced, challenges that you've had to confront, and I hope you've been able to overcome them. Looking inward, contemplating where we've been and where we're headed. So that's your own agenda. But with your permission, I would like to add at least a few items to whatever personal list you've come into shul with tonight. Certainly at the top of that list, it would have to be that cheshbon hanefesh, that personal accounting of our lives. So every person in this room and everyone who's watching online tonight knows that that's one of the things that you're supposed to do when you come into shul. On Yom Kippur, you're supposed to say, who am I? What is my life all about? And am I doing okay? You know what? You can't do that on a smartphone. There's no accounting cheshbon hanefesh app. There's no app for that, right? There's no app for that. Tomorrow afternoon, mincha services. I hope you'll come back. Book of Jonah is read, the Maftir Yonah. And I'm sure you remember that at the beginning of the story, Jonah is called by God to go to Nineveh to deliver a prophecy to Nineveh's people. So God calls Jonah. Does anyone remember what Jonah does? He runs away. Yeah, he runs away. God calls Jonah, and immediately it says, Vayakom Yonah livroch Tarshisha. That's what the text says. So right away, Jonah hears God's call. Jonah gets up, and he runs as far away as he possibly can. And the way I've always understood that moment is that Jonah is running away from God, right? I mean, that's the way it seems. That seems to be the pshat, what we would say, the plain meaning of the text. He doesn't want the responsibility. He doesn't want to deal with it. So what does he do? He runs away. We've all done it. We've all done it one time or another. But we've been studying over the last few weeks the book of Jonah and some commentaries on the book. In Talmud class, Michael's here, we meet Thursday afternoons. And someone suggested in class just a couple of weeks ago, as we're looking at the text, that maybe what is actually happening there, it's not that Jonah is running away from God, he's running away from himself. He's so uncomfortable with himself and how he's been living in his own skin day to day to day that he can't bear to look at his own life, and he actually can't take the time to realize who he actually is. And so he considers himself unworthy of undertaking God's mission. He says to himself, how could God choose me? I don't deserve it. And that's the psychological action in Jonah's mind. So Yom Kippur comes along and says, you can't run away from who you are. You can't run away from the divine mission that living as a human being imposes upon us. Judaism suggests to us that we are part of God's divine plan for the world, for the universe, and that we, in our own lives, are capable of helping in furthering that mission, of carrying out God's mission, or maybe missions is a better way to say it. And that is true despite any reservations that we might have about our own worth or past deeds that we're sitting here tonight worrying about. The good news of Yom Kippur is that you can change. You can change for the better, change your life, make steps forward, and do better than you've done before. But you first have to do the work to understand what needs to be changed. How are you going to know what you're supposed to change unless you've thought it through and understood it fully? I'm not saying tonight, I don't mean to suggest that in the next 25 hours you can do all of that work. It probably will take significantly longer than that. But I think at least being here on Kol Nidre night, being here tomorrow on the Yom Kippur, the tradition is inviting us to begin, at least to begin the process of doing that work. Also, goes without saying, another thing we're supposed to spend a good part of the next 25 hours thinking about is sin. And that's another theme, obviously, that sets Yom Kippur apart from Rosh Hashanah. You think about davening last week. There are no lists of Hashamnus in the Rosh Hashanah davening. There are no Al-Chaitz in the Rosh Hashanah davening. But tonight and tomorrow, we're going to chant the Hashamnu, we're going to beat our chests, we're going to say the Al-Chaitz how many times? At least 5. Yeah, I say it at least 5 times when you count through. So the Yom Kippur Liturgy, every single time we come into shul throughout the next 25 hours, really confronts us. It challenges us. It confronts us with our failures and our faults. I don't know about you. Every time I read through one of the lists of sins, particularly the Al-Chet list, every time I read through it, at some point during the day, something catches my attention, and I say, ooh, that's one I really got to work on. I mean, it happens every single year. And many years, it's more than one thing. So we have to think about what it means to sin and what it means to repair sin, what it means to get back on track from the mistakes that we've made. You know what else we're supposed to do on Yom Kippur is just remember. And you can't remember in the tumult of the busy world today either. So what do we want to remember? We should remember that we are Jews. We should remember that Jewish values are supposed to shape us and guide us in our lives. We should remember that Jewish history is something that should be important to us and that we should be knowledgeable about. Think about tomorrow and tomorrow morning, and we'll come together just as the Torah service is getting ready to conclude, and we recite Yizkor. What does Yizkor mean? It means memory, to remember. And in doing Yizkor and reciting Yizkor, what do? We remember the people with whom we have shared the journey of our years. Remember also that a year has gone by, and the events that have defined us, not just in that year, but in our lives, those also come back into our minds during the Yom Tov season. And remember also that we say that God remembers as well. One last thing for sure the tradition wants us to consider during Yom Kippur, and that is Teshuva. So you all know what Teshuva is. Tell me what it means. What? So return is one, okay? And atonement, we commonly would say. It's usually one of those two things. It's either atonement, we do Teshuva, we atone, right, for our sins, or it means to return, to come back to something. But in fact, it also has a different meaning, because Teshuva means to answer. If there's a shaila, a question, there's a teshuva. A tshuva means an answer. So if our doing tshuva means that we're offering a reply, what is the question, or maybe better to say, what are the questions that we are answering, that we are responding to? I'm going to suggest three. The first two are closely connected with the birth of God's universe and going back to the earliest stories that we have in Genesis of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. And you'll remember also this story. Having eaten forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve are attempting to hide from God, sort of an echo, or I guess Jonah, an echo of their behavior. And God appears, and God asks this very weighted question. It's really just one word in the Hebrew. The question is, ayeka, means, where are you? Where are you? Where are you hiding? Why are you hiding? What are you fearful of? And that's a question for each of us to ask on a Yom Kippur evening. Then you go just a few verses later in Genesis, and Cain at this point has slain his brother Abel, and God again appears with a question. Hevel achicha, God asks, where is your brother Abel? Has Abel disappeared from you? Have you thought about who Abel is supposed to be and how you were supposed to treat him? Has he run away because you mistreated him? Or is something even worse than that happens? Do you have so little compassion for your brother that you actually caused his death? And that's also a question that each of us have to, not in that exact precise way, but in the metaphor of who is our brother in our community, in our country, in our world, and how are we being responsible for them? And then a third question confronts us tomorrow morning when we hear the great text of Isaiah read for the Yom Kippur morning Haftarah. And you know the text well. Is this the fast that I desire? A day for people to starve their bodies? Is it bowing the head like a bulrush and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast? Do you call that a day which God will find favorable? And Isaiah responds to his own question. No, that's not the fast I desire. The fast I desire is this: to unlock fetters of wickedness, to untie the cords of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every bind. It's to share your bread with the hungry, to take the wretched poor into your home when you see the naked, to clothe them, and do not ignore your own brother, your own flesh. These are the very questions that the quiet time of Yom Kippur invites us to consider. And for each of us to offer a tshuva, to offer what is our answer to that question going to be in this year. Ayeka, where are you right now? Where do you want to be? Hevel achicha, what is your responsibility to your fellow human being? Hakazeh yetzom evcharehu, is this the fast that I desire in your religious life? Are you doing what you really think God wants you to be doing? In the somber quiet of Kol Nidre Eve, I pray, and I think each of us does, that we discover a meaningful teshuvah, a meaningful answer to each of those questions, an answer to fill our lives with purpose, with promise, to fill our homes and our families with love and caring, to fill our community with a generosity of spirit that will make a difference so it's a better place for all of us to live in, and our world to be filled with peace, and our planet to be filled with hope for the future. Then we can dream that the words of Isaiah also from tomorrow morning's Haftarah will be fulfilled. When you called me Adonai, when you called me God, I answered, and I said, Hineni, here I am. Shana Tova, good Yantif, and Tzom Kal, Tzom Kal.